Hey, welcome to another episode of Straight from the Desk. This time we will cover how to paint a 32mm head, here the head of our Space Marine. So we're going for a very classic approach, in the very same manner how I would approach a larger head, such as a bust. But here we just have to do like a smaller version of things. So also for details like the eyes, we cannot go full detail. We try to get like the maximum which we can achieve in that scale, and that is the final white reflection in the eye. For a larger model, we could definitely introduce more detail here. So we're trying to reduce the detail according to the scale. So we will work generally in the same approach than with a large figure. So each and every volume that we see needs an own highlight matching to the shape. Alright, so let's see how we do that. Alright, so today we'll talk about how to paint a 28mm head or 32mm head. This is like a typical Games Workshop head. I started with the Chaos Black primer from Games Workshop, and we will continue with some tones that I have here on the palette. Okay, here on the palette we have some red beige from Model Color, some flat red also from Model Color, some dark sea blue also from Model Color, some of the armor brown from the Model Color Air range, some Model Color black, and some Schmincke titanium white. For the start we will mix one base tone that we can use only with black and white to do our base shading, and this monochrome setup really helps us to be able to correct our blending mistakes in the beginning. Okay, so we would start with a medium base tone consistency, and we will just paint the whole face. Make sure to also cover details such as the eyeballs. You don't really need to paint these details here to the side. Just all the flesh parts. I'm working with a Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 1, and that brush should allow us actually to do all the work from base tone to the small highlights in the eyes. I prefer to paint over a little bit here, do these details here to the side to really make sure to have the same skin tone all the way into the recesses. We will have to do some refinement and cleanup work later on. Okay, also here under the chin. Okay, make really sure to have an equal layer of the paint here on the surface. We might thin down here the paint a little to the side of our paint dot, and just continue here with another thinner layer just to make sure really all these details are well covered. By starting with an opaque base tone like that, it's easier to get back to that very same tone that we have on the palette than if you would have already differences here from how light and dark the color appears because of the base color shining through. Alright, so you can see now that the paint is dry, we have a very nice and even finish, and we will start picking out the highlights. So I want the Terminator to be facing slightly in the direction his arm is pointing, and so the head will be more turned like that, and we have our light here from this side, so we'll have our highlights mainly running across this side. So let's start with some of the base tone here in the back of the brush. And we're working with, I would say, a heavy glaze, and you can see here how our control dot is really a lot more visible than before. So having that thinner color in the back of the brush and some white on the tip, we can start introducing here the first highlights to the side of the forehead. Okay, and while this dries, we can continue with our highlight work. And you can see here for the face, we're really doing that just with tiny amounts of paint in the brush. Pushing the contrast here a bit stronger. Okay, as the nose is really a very small detail, I will just mix a highlight tone here on the palette, and we can use that more opaque, so in a medium layer consistency. So I'm first adding a highlight here to the top of the bridge of the nose, and then just taking a bit of the base tone and wet blending it down towards the tip of the nose. We'll also add small highlights to the sides here of the nose. And also here on the top of that nose tip. And we can just continue here along the cheek, and you can see, if you pay close attention to the sculpt, you can see that we have two different small volumes here, one there and one here. And I'm just placing strong highlights first and then softening them out a bit with some of the base tone here. Here we will keep our base tone as a shadow tone in that wrinkle, and by just placing the highlights here on that volume above the lid, we can create quite a nice dramatic impact here. As I said before, the highlight will be more focused here on this side, so our highlight work on the other side will be less intense, but still there. working between a medium and a light layer consistency for this step, just to have a little bit more of that base color shining through. Again, with the brighter and more opaque tone, we can continue the highlight here on the forehead. Also stretching it here and making it rounder so it fits the shape of the skull here. Also add a bit more white here to the mix for our maximum highlights. And I can introduce those here to the top. And again slightly darker with the base tone. Just placing it here as a layer next to the color that we just applied. Just thinning down the paint here for our mid highlight tone and working with that as a light glaze. We can soft out some of the highlight work that we've done before. Just make sure it's not pooling somewhere, so you're really just applying a thin layer of that paint. Okay, so I think we should do some defining work. So I think we should do some defining work using some of our Almo Brown here with a bit of black. And we're using that here to outline the eye and give a little bit of shadow here under the eyebrows. We'll use the same tone here to paint the lips. And also the lower side here of the nose. We can also use the very same dark tone here to outline the head. And yeah, I will just continue with the outlining process and we'll be back once that step is completed. Alright? Alright, so you can see I continued with the cleanup work and also blocked out the small pin here to the forehead and cleaned up the elements here to the side. And I think now we already get like a very nice look of the definition that we achieved on the model. We will continue with some detailing work. First some shadows. I'm just adding water here to the side of the paint dot to have our shadow tone as a very light glaze. And first introducing it here to the temple area. Also here a little to the side of the nose. Once that is dry, we can apply a second glaze here to the temple area. And it's very important for the glazing technique that you don't allow the paint to pool on the surface. This way you won't leave any nasty marks. So we're really trying to pull it on the surface as a thin film, letting it dry here, where we want to achieve most of the contrast. And you can see here I'm pushing it more under the volume of the cheek here, leaving that area lighter. Here also that very thin line between the eyebrow area and the nose, and a little bit here in that typical Space Marine forehead wrinkle. And as I said before, to the other side we will apply more shadow, but we're also doing that using glazes, building up the contrast bit by bit. Okay, a bit stronger. But still working with a light glaze. Okay, you can see here it dried a little spotty, so we will correct that using some of our base tone here. And we'll correct that using some of our base tone here. Also thinned down is a light glaze consistency. That looks good, and we will continue some of the detailing work here in the eyes, and therefore I'm mixing our light skin tone again, like the brightest tone that we've used before, but slightly more opaque. So we're working somewhere between medium and heavy layer consistency. Okay, and I will use some of the shadow color to correct the white here of the eyes, because they didn't turn out to be equal size, so this one here turned out slightly bigger. I think that looks fine. And the next step, we'll just use some pure black. You just have to make sure to have not too much paint on the brush, and I'm using that to place the pupil here. Okay, I like the look here. I went for placing the iris slightly here to the side, because in the end he will be facing more towards this side. I also want to add a tiny white reflex in the eye, but I'm not sure I can pull it off, so yeah, this is really meticulous work, but it's actually really nice to have that reflection in there. So just adding a tiny bit of white to the brush. Ah, that was too big. Also, that was slightly too big. So, just remixing some of the shadow tone here. trying to get rid of that upper bit here again. Yeah, I actually like the look of that quite a lot. So, yeah, I think this completes the detailing step here of the eyes quite good. I might have to pull it a little bit closer to see if it needs some refinement work here. But for now I think we're good, and in the next step I'll show you how to glaze in a bit more of a color variation here to the face. Alright, so here we are with our head, with the eyes painted, and yeah, we will continue with some color variation. First we're thinning down a tiny bit of the red. Usually reds are super intense, so you really want to make sure that your work is as thin as possible. And I've added a bit of the umber brown. And you can see once you have it here, it already looks a little bit too intense. So we'll thin that down even more. And this is really the ultralight glaze. And we'll use that here according to the color zone theory. So we're first adding it here to the ears and under the cheek. A little bit on the lower side of the nose. And the impact here is really hardly visible, but this is definitely better than staining our nice blended face here using some of that glaze. Okay, more red here. That was already too much. So quickly just wiping it off here with a wet brush. And you can see how that red here in this area really helps us to make the face look a lot more alive. I think for now it's good with the color variation. In the red color zone, the next thing that we'll do is we'll thin down some of the dark sea blue here. Also very thin. And we will introduce that here to the lower color zone, to the third color zone. This here might appear like a 5 o'clock shadow, but it's actually more a reflecting shadow color of the environment. As our guy is here trapped in his gold armor, we could even add like a little bit of sheen from the gold here. But I think just here to get more like a general look of a face, we can just stick to the blue. Yeah, I like that look a lot. And for the forehead, you can see I've added some model color yellow ochre here. Also, the yellow tone is super intense, so we have to make sure to really use that only as a very light glaze. We're going to introduce that here close to the highlight, and this is just a very nice indication of like a natural daylight if the guy is standing outside. And as we have a lot of yellow in the armor and the golds, I think that yellow here is actually really nice to bind the two elements together. And you can see the impact here is actually really nice and really subtle, and it's not really all that visible, but it really helps to get like a very warm, natural looking skin tone here. And yeah, I really like the setup so far. I think here for that small element we can just proceed with a white highlight. Don't necessarily need a metallic tone in here. And with a little bit of the dark sea blue, we can just dab that to the lower side. Too small, highlight a bit. Okay, I will continue filling out some of these details here to the side, and we'll be back to finish that. Alright, so you can see I continued here with a little work on these details here to the side. I didn't do all that much to it because those will be hidden really in the shadow area here. We can continue with the work here on that side, using some dark sea blue and some white on the tip. To do like a small loader brush here. Okay, a bit more intense. And some small highlights using the pure white. And for the black here, I think I don't want to add all that much color, so these hose here will be painted also. So these cables here will be painted just in black. And because the area is really tiny, that's not a lot of space to pull a loader brush, I'll just use a gray that I mixed here on the palette. Looks good already, but I think I want to push the contrast just a tiny bit more, adding a bit more white to the mix. Yeah, I think that looks good. And yeah, I think the head looks good. Just let us put them in place to see how it looks. Alright. Alright, I think now that we have the head in place, I think it looks really fantastic. It works very well with the placement of the highlight and with those tiny reflections in the eyes. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the tutorial so far. In the next chapter we will cover elements like the bolter, these little elements here, and yeah, then there's also the cape to do and the weapon, but we will cover that in the following videos. Alright,